Hey, so I'm a little sick. Got the funny sick voice, and I didn't, I feel like I look sick, which is code, I guess, for I don't feel like I look great. But I had this experience this morning that I just wanted to share. This is in a nut. I mean, I wrote this like dramatic subject line, right? Like the difference between loving someone and manipulating them. And this is, I mean, there's tomes and tomes of therapeutic and coaching work done on this. But I want to speak to just one little distinction that's based on an experience that I had this morning. And welcome to those of you I'm seeing join. This is going to be super short because my daughter is about to come home from school, but please feel free to bring your questions and your shares anyway. And even if I don't get to them live, I promise I will come back and we can have a discussion that way. So there's a couple of pieces to this. And one, I'll start from the side of, there's a quote. Actually, I think it was my friend Jeffrey Platts who said this. I was about to say, there's this famous quote. I don't know if it's famous, but I just thought this was a brilliant piece that Jeffrey wrote. And he said, it was something about it's an act of, it's a great act of kindness to treat yourself lovingly, even when you're not loving yourself. And so there's that, and that's its own whole thing. It was just, I saw that and I was like, that is so exquisitely said. And the way that relates to this morning was that, without going into all the details about it, but my boyfriend and I just had this really beautiful weekend away. We took a course together that was based around intimacy. We spent just a ton of time together. We really, it was just so sweet and beautiful and kind of predictably, frankly. Not so much predictably just for us, but this is, I see this a lot with couples, and I have watched it with myself, with previous partners, and this is, and then we had to go to, we were out late last night because we went to this extraordinary show by my friend Monique DeBose called Mulatto Math. And anyway, again, I don't want to go into the whole story, but we had to get up very early to get on the airplane this morning. So we were underslept, we were tender from our experiences. Probably there were parts of us that had kind of opened to each other in new ways and hadn't quite figured out all the pieces yet. And we got in a fight on the airplane. And I could see it even as it was happening. And this isn't really the point, but there's a thing. It was we weren't seated together and we wanted to sit together. And he said, well, you're the people person, so you handle that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to handle it. But then he saw me doing it and I was sort of flailing. And so he jumped in. And then anyway, the whole thing just kind of spiraled and I got overwhelmed. And so I think I said something snippy because I was overwhelmed. And it was I could watch the whole thing. It was I thought he thought I was stupid and doing it wrong. And so then I got defensive and he thought he was just trying to help. And there I was snipping at him. And so there's that whole piece, which, excuse me, it kind of isn't the point of this live, but there's these predictable things that happen in relationship. And ultimately I apologized and there were these different things that happened, but we were still, there was, I would say on both sides, we were still a little hurt when we separated. And it wasn't horrible bad. We weren't yelling. It wasn't some big fight in a sense, but some part of me was hurt about something that happened and some part of him was hurt about something that happened. And I could really feel, actually, I'm glad I brought that quote in because I could feel these two sides. And one was really about where it was actually an act of love towards myself to let it be okay that we weren't perfect. And I don't just mean oh, we had a fight, we're not perfect. But even as we said goodbye, It was like it wasn't 100% resolved. Yeah, to kind of let it be unresolved actually was loving towards myself, like rather than kind of moving in and being like, or, you know, whatever way. A lot of that, I mean, there's habit tendencies, right? To like, oh, there's some anxiety about the disconnect. And especially it was like, oh, we were so connected. Oh, I wish I could mute myself. I have to cough. I'm so sorry. I have this chest thing. And then anxiety that comes up around that the separation, especially after such like intimacy and closeness. But also, for myself, and then what I see for a lot of people who have that kind of a tendency to move in like that, is that it's actually it's wanting to avoid the discomfort of just like, oh, so we're in a little moment of like dis-ease, and rather than just like allowing that to be. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done this. I'm totally not well enough to do a live. Sorry. And so I was really loving to both of us, frankly, to just go like, oh, it's okay. Like, I trust us. I trust me. I trust him. Like, I trust us to, we don't have to be 100% connected and like so happy with each other in every moment. I trust that we'll find our way. And it was a little painful. I mean, I drove away and I also let myself, oh, thanks, Evelyn. It's working its way out. I let myself cry. And it was kind of like, that's okay too. It just doesn't have to mean a bunch of huge things about it. It could just, like, I feel sad and it's okay, like, to just cry on the way home. And feel that way even simultaneously as I like stepped into my first call or my team meeting or these like, oh, it's all of it. I neither have to like, you know, clear the decks and just feel all day, or like stuff it away and like become competent Kendra. But like, oh, I could just feel tender and still meet the day. And then he was a little sick too in these things. And I noticed this part of me, he's going to pick our daughter up and then bring her to my house. And I thought about some medicine that I had that I think would help him, and noticed like the tiny little part of me that wants to like, it's like withhold, like, oh, well, he didn't, you know, say the thing I wanted him to say or something. And, or then the part that could be like, well, maybe you should stay for dinner and like I'll take care of you, which again is that part that just doesn't want to like let it be what it is. But right there in the middle, like not trying to get him to not be hurt about something that I said or did, or to not be angry at me or having anger get triggered about whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like not, the manipulation really comes from trying to make the other person feel differently or act differently. But I could feel the part where I could just say like, hey, I have this for you when you drop our daughter off. Like, and especially, so this is part of where the loving part comes in, which is that acts of service are one of his love languages. And they're not mine. So I'm always like, what can I do? What can I do? You know, they don't even occur to me. Like acts of service just don't even occur to me, but I see it. I see the way that he like fixes my gate, or I see the way that he does things on my car, or I see the way there's like these things and I'm like, oh, he's loving me. And so I could feel, it was like, oh, I could, this act of service, right? I have this and I could provide this for him and just love him in the way that he could feel loved, even though I'm a little mad at him and he's a little mad at me. And I don't expect my offering that or doing that to change either one of those things, but just to recognize that I still have the capacity to act in a loving way regardless. So that's the point I wanted to make. Apologies about my cough. I hope it made sense. And thank you, Evelyn. Yeah, I'm glad that that landed for you. Carl said, that's how I respond to gifts. It's not one of my languages, but now I can notice it. I'm wondering if gifts for you is like acts of service for me. Like you're like, well, that's nice. Um, Gifts is one of my love languages, actually. It took me a long time to admit that because I thought it was shallow. Like I judged it as shallow. But actually, it's like my favorite, especially to be surprised, like to be surprised by something that's really perfect. I'm just like, oh, like they thought of me and they thought of the perfect thing. And so, um, yeah, if any of you, I know I talked about love languages here without really referencing it, but if any of you don't know, I can't remember now the person who did the work, but there's a fellow who did a whole work on the 5 love languages, and you can Google it. There's a book about it, but I think there's a whole bunch of information just on the website, the 5 love languages, and you can even take a test. And I've never taken it, frankly. I mean, maybe it's super, super helpful, but my experience is that the best place to look at what are your love languages is to look at like, how do you offer love? So this is a total left turn here, but I'm just going to go with it for a minute. They're words of praise or words of acknowledgement, touch, acts of service, quality time, and gifts. See, I forgot that one because I'm always dismissing it. And some things that are really useful to look at, first of all, is how do you just naturally, when you want to show someone you love them, how do you naturally want to do it? And that's a very good indicator of how you want to receive love. And then just notice if there were any on there where you're like, well, duh, that's everyone's love language. Like sometimes touch people are like that, especially. They're like, everyone needs touch. And first of all, it's a really good indicator that that's how you love to receive love. And it's worth noticing that I mean, yes, everybody does have some touch needs or some quality time needs or some, like we all do love to be loved in these ways. But actually for me, for instance, touch is not my primary love. It's not in my top 2. And I mean, I love to be physical with people. I love to be affectionate. I love to be sexual. But as a way of actually like expressing love, that's actually my partner's primary love language. And I have to remind myself sometimes to like reach and like squeeze him because that's how he receives loves. And for me, it's words of affirmation, which do nothing for him. So if I just like offer love the way that I want to, and I'm just like, you're so great, and you did this, and I love you this, and he's kind of like, why doesn't she love me? Okay. I got to jump off here, but I just want to check the comments real quick. And yes, Carl, thank you. You were on it with the different 5 love languages. So you can look those up online if this is interesting. I mean, I think they're super valuable. I highly recommend it. Kevin said, I was at a workshop somewhere and they offered an interesting perspective on this. The only real human love language is touch. The rest are ways of conditioning. I would disagree, but that's cool. I didn't learn from them, so I don't, maybe if I heard from them, I would be like, oh, that's really interesting and true in some way. But I really see a distinction in the way that people give and receive. And Carl, I agree. All right, my daughter's home. I love you. Thanks for joining. Ciao.